Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live webinar brought to you by immigration.question.com, your trusted source for immigration news, expert legal insights, and real time conversations with experienced immigration attorneys. My name is Anisya Mukherjee, and I'll be your host for today's important session Hope and Justice After Harm Navigating VAWA Protections and the U Visa Path for Immigration Survivors. For immigration survivors of violence, the journey towards safety and legal protection can feel overwhelming. Many face the dual challenge of healing from harm while also navigating a complex immigration system that can feel intimidating and unclear. That's why we are here today to shed light on two critical protections available to survivors: the Violence Against Women's Act, or the VAWA, and the U Visa. This webinar will give you clarity and confidence you need to move forward, whether you're exploring protections for yourself, supporting a loved one, or navigating an ongoing application. We are honored to be joined today by attorney Carla Casas, the founding and managing attorney of Casas Immigration Limited. Born in Peru and an immigrant herself, attorney Casas has dedicated more than 20 years to defending immigrant rights with a background in family immigration, humanitarian protections, removal defense, and federal litigation. She has guided countless survivors through the complexities of VAWA and U visa protections. Her personal journey and deep courtroom experience make her uniquely qualified to provide both expertise and compassion in this area of immigration law. You are welcome, Attorney Casas. We're thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Right, thank you. Before we dive in, a quick but important reminder. ImmigrationQuestion.com is a two-in-one platform that connects users with licensed immigration attorneys. We are not a law firm and are not affiliated with AILA or USCIS. All legal services are provided independently by attorneys in our network. So let's start with the first question. Attorney Casas, to begin, can you break down the main differences between a VAWA self petition and a U visa, and how can someone determine which option best fits their situation?
Sure. Both the U visa and VAWA are meant to protect victims of various types of abuse, of crimes. But the VAWA, we'll start with VAWA, that is based on you have to have a qualifying relationship with the abuser. So it could be your US citizen or legal permanent resident spouse if they're abusive to you, or if it's your child over 21 who is a US citizen or legal permanent resident, or if you are under 21, it could be your parent who has status and is abusive to you. So in those cases, it basically allows you to petition on your own without the help of that family member. So you would be filing a self-petition. It does not require any sort of police report. You're not, working with authorities. If you did file a report, that's great. That's additional evidence, but it's not required. So that's the main thing. For VAWA, you do need to have a qualifying relationship, meaning that your spouse has status, your child, or your parent. The U visa, on the other hand, is for victims of crime, right? So victims of crime here in the US, it must be a qualifying crime. So it's not any crime. There's a list of crimes by statute, but it tends to be things like victims of sexual assault, of domestic violence, of battery, robbery, things like that. And if in those situations for the U visa, you do have to have filed a report, with the authorities, because the authorities have to be the ones to sign a certification for you to move forward with your U visa. So it is dependent on you being able to obtain that certification from whether the police department or the judge or the prosecutor. It really depends what type of case we're talking about. But that's really the first step. You need to be able to get that certification. And then once you have that, then you can apply for the U visa. You're also applying on your own, basically. It's not dependent on someone else, but you do need that certification. Those are kind of the two main differences. So for individuals who do family member who has status, but they have been a victim of a crime, the U visa would be the option for them.
Thank you for that. So, what are the key eligibility requirements survivors should keep in mind when applying for either VAWA or a U visa?
Sure. So as I mentioned, with VAWA, we would need to have that relationship, right? So It's somebody who is married to a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident, but they could also do it after getting divorced. That's something a lot of people don't know. Even when if you've divorced that person, you have 2 years from the date of the divorce to be able to apply to file for VAWA. It could also be based again on your child. We have a lot of cases where the US citizen child over 21 is abusive to the parent. We had one situation I recall where the son, our client's son, was dealing drugs out of the house, wasn't working, just, gang members would show up. And she had asked him to leave and he refused. He was like, try to kick me out. I'll call ICE and you're the one who's going to, be deported. So in those situations, for example, that VAWA would be the case that they could file. For U visa, again, we would need, if there's been a crime that's been committed, the person does have to report it to the police and cooperate with the police. I've had situations where I recall one case here in Chicago where my client was held at gunpoint by gang members. And he, reported it to the police, and then they wanted him to testify. But he was afraid because these were serious gang members. And so they gave us a little bit of a hard time because they said, well, he didn't cooperate. I was able to convince them, though, that it's not, you weren't going to protect him. You cannot expect someone to put their life on the line. So he cooperated as much as was reasonably possible for him. In the end, we got them to sign, but they did give some pushback. And this is where it's really helpful to work with an experienced attorney who has handled these types of cases, who knows how to make those arguments to the authorities. But yes, with regard to U visa, we definitely need that certification. With U visa, I want to mention, it doesn't matter how long ago the crime happened. Oftentimes we have individuals who say, oh, well, I was a victim of robbery, but it's already been 5 years. There is no statute of limitations, so to speak, with regard to U visa. Now, I will say the problem we run into when it's been, longer periods of time is sometimes it's hard to find records of that. Sometimes the police no longer has the report anymore. And if the client doesn't have it, the police is not going to sign something if they don't have evidence of what happened. So it's still a good idea to move forward with those cases promptly. But we have had cases where it happened 10, 12 years ago. And if we were able to obtain the police report, we've been able to get certifications for that person, no matter how long it's been, and you can still apply for a U visa in that case.
All right, thank you for that. Now, gathering strong evidence is often the most challenging part. What types of documentation carry the most weight with USCIS in these cases?
Sure. Well, I think I can say that in both cases, the applicant's declaration is very important. So this is the opportunity to tell their story. We spend a lot of time on our client's declaration. And we typically also require them to obtain a psychological evaluation. That is also good evidence. We have several therapists that we work with that are very skilled when it comes to working with victims of crime, of abuse. And so those are two really important pieces. There are times when there is not a lot more. We get creative, and this is again where an attorney who's handled many of these cases can be really helpful to help you find, come up with more evidence, think of things you can include. But if there has been, for example, a police report, obviously that's really helpful for U visa, as we said, it's a requirement, right? But even for VAWA, if the person has filed a police report regarding the abuse, then we want to include that. A lot of times it's things like letters of support from maybe family members who were witness to the abuse. For both, I'm referring to both VAWA and U visa because in both cases these are crime victims, basically victims of abuse. There's been times where we've included text messages, for example, for VAWA cases between the spouses, if you can see that it's an abusive, language being used, or voicemails, photos of injuries, if there have been injuries, those types of things. But again, I think one of the things that sometimes clients assume that they have to have all this evidence to be able to apply. And, there's been times we've had clients for VAWA, for example, where they had to flee the home suddenly because the spouse was so abusive, and they didn't have time to gather all this evidence and all these records. The regulations, the law is clear that you don't have to have this huge amount of evidence because it's understandable that you may not be able to have it, especially if your spouse was abusive. So we do get creative with sometimes social media. We can find evidence through there. But I would say probably the most important piece is a very detailed declaration from the client telling their story, something that's consistent, right? It's very important to make sure everything is consistent. USCIS, especially nowadays, is really nitpicking these cases and tearing things apart quickly if they see inconsistencies in the testimony. So that's the reason we do spend a lot of time on those declarations for our clients.
Definitely. Thank you for that. My next question would be, from your experience, what are the most common mistakes applicants make when pursuing VAWA or U visas, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah, I would say with regard to both, I would start just generally speaking with regard to both. I think what I previously mentioned, I would say that again. I think a lot of times clients assume, for example, with VAWA, a lot of times they think they have to have a police report, or they'll say like, how do I prove abuse? How do I, and there's been clients that unfortunately, for example, they divorced, they were victims of abuse, they divorced, they let 2 years go by because they didn't think that they had enough. And then when they come to me, it's already been 2 years. And unfortunately, the law is clear that after divorce, you only have 2 years to file. And in those situations, it's so hard because I have to tell them, like, we could have filed, we didn't need all of that, but now we can't because it's been 2 years and you let the time expire. With the U visa, one thing I've also seen is sometimes when clients try to do it on their own, and they'll go and they're able to get the police to sign the certification, but then they don't realize that once you get that signed certification, you only have 6 months to file the case. And I've seen that situation too, where the client let it expire, and you can't file. You have to go back to the police, and oftentimes they don't want to sign another one. They're afraid of like fraud, or you, I don't know, giving it to someone else to file a case. They just don't want to cooperate a second time. And so I would say time is of the essence. It's so important, right, with regard to timing for both cases for different reasons, in different ways. But I think that's really important. And then just, being, as I mentioned earlier too, being consistent. I think it's so important. Like, we thoroughly review our cases. We have different levels of review in my office. I have paralegals who prepare the first draft, and then an attorney will review, and then I will, as a managing attorney, a lot of times I'll review, especially the tricky cases, to make sure everything is consistent. Because, if you're saying one date here and then a different date shows up somewhere else, or even with the psychological evaluation, if that's not consistent with the declaration we prepared. So I think all of those things have to check off the list. You have to make sure you're submitting a strong case. Again, especially right now under the current administration, things are just getting more difficult, and they're really scrutinizing things, looking at things a lot closer. So I would say those are some of the things that I've seen in terms of mistakes that clients might make.
Definitely. So, how do VAWA and U visas serve as pathways not just to safety but also to permanent residency and long term stability in the US?
Well, and this is the reason why I love these two types of cases. They are both a path to a green card. The idea behind both of these statutes that created the U visa, VAWA, is to be able to give this person who has been a victim of crime, who has been, feels so vulnerable, to give them the power to be able to, on their own, go forth and apply for this stability in this country. With VAWA, it's giving the person the freedom of not feeling like they're controlled by their abusive spouse and they have to stay with them, which I've seen many times, right? I need to get that green card. I can't afford to leave him. And again, people a lot of times don't even know that VAWA is an option, so they do stay, even with VAWA, because they're not aware of VAWA. And so it gives them that the power to be able to move on their own, to be able to apply and eventually be able to get a green card. Because the U visa, for example, leads to a green card. When you get the U visa, I will say the U visa, it's very long time processing times right now. So it's not a quick fix. I always tell clients when they come, that's the first thing I tell them. It's going to take several years to get your U visa approved. However, the time is going to pass anyway. So whether you're doing this or doing nothing, the time's still going to pass. But the U visa, once you do get an approval, you're going to have that U visa for 3 years. And after the 3 years, you can apply for a green card. And it's for 4 years, but after 3 years, you can apply. So typically we do encourage clients to apply right away as soon as they're eligible for the green card. So the U visa will lead you to the green card. With VAWA, the VAWA is actually, if you're doing VAWA and the green card application together, I will mention that this is, again, why it's very important to speak with an attorney about this, because not everybody will be eligible for both the VAWA visa and the green card. For various reasons, sometimes the individual can only do VAWA, which will still give them a benefit. But if they're eligible for VAWA and the green card, then it'll take about, I think right now it is at about 4 years, but it's something that will get them to the green card. It's basically a green card application for that person. And then from there, after they've completed the correct amount of time, they can apply for to become a U.S. citizen.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Attorney Casas. This session has so far been really insightful. To everyone joining us from Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, thank you so much for being here. Whether you're a legal professional, community advocate, or someone just looking to understand this better, we're grateful to have you. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. We're immigrationquestion.com, a meeting ground between immigration attorneys and individuals seeking answers to immigration questions. Our two-in-one platform is built with outstanding features to help simplify the immigration process. Though we are not affiliated with AILA, we are trusted by many AILA attorneys who use our platform. With immigrationquestion.com, you can also ask your immigration questions for free in any language and get connected with a licensed immigration attorney for legal guidance. And yes, just like many of our users, you may also receive a free confidential initial consultation. Just visit www.immigrationquestion.com to learn more. And it gets better. We just launched our new mobile app designed to make access even easier whether you're a user or an attorney. Now, Attorney Casas, as an immigrant yourself with extensive experience defending immigration rights for over 2 decades of legal experience, how would you describe the impact immigrationquestion.com is having on the immigrant community and on immigration attorneys like yourself?
I mean, I think right now I am supportive of any platform that gets, correct information out to immigrants. Right now, there's such an overload of information coming from different sources, and it's difficult to know who to trust, right? So, to the extent that there are more platforms out there that are vetting the information that they're sharing, that they're collaborating with attorneys who can make sure they are, getting out the right information. I think that's so valuable right now. I can say that having arrived in this country in the 1980s, I'm originally from Peru, at that time we had no information because there was no internet. I mean, it was such a different time and it was just very scary. Even as a child, I'm the oldest, so I was always trying to guide my parents and it was so difficult to find information. So I appreciate the fact that now there is a lot more out there. However, now we have the flip side of that you don't know who to believe, who to trust. So I think it's really important for individuals to find the platforms where they vetted them and they know I can trust what they're telling me. I can guide myself by the information they're putting out there.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that. It is gratifying to know that both immigrants and attorneys benefit immensely from our platform. So finally, we get into the Q&A session. But before that, what advice would you give to survivors who feel fearful or discouraged about beginning the process?
First, I don't blame them. I can totally understand the fear because things are changing so rapidly. But I think the first thing is knowing that when you speak to an immigration attorney, any information that you give them is confidential. It's not going to leave their office. I know that some individuals are afraid to even do that, right? To reach out to an attorney because they think that might have repercussions. But I think it's really important to get that out there. Anything a client tells me with regard to their case in my office, even obviously during the initial consultation, even if they don't hire me, that is confidential information. So I think it's really important to at least, find a good attorney and at least have that initial consultation so that you know what to expect. One of the things actually just happened in my office last week is we had a young woman who called us. She's a U.S. citizen, but both of her parents are undocumented, and she's young. She's just turned 18, and both of her parents were detained by ICE here in Chicago. ICE actually came to their house, was staking out the house, and then detained both of her parents. So she called in a panic. I mean, my heart broke for her. She had no idea what to do. But when I'm trying to ask her the questions that we need to know about the parents' background, and she knew nothing. She knew nothing about their background. She didn't know if they've been arrested before, if they've, exited and entered the country, all these things that are important to know so that I know how to move forward with their case. She just didn't know. And so that I spoke to my staff that day and I was like, we need to get the word out to individuals. Don't wait until you're detained by ICE. Do it now. Have that initial consultation so that you are clear what your options are. Is there a way to fight your case? Is it worth spending the money? Because yes, we all know lawyers are expensive, but if you have a good shot, it is worth, that is money going towards your future here in the US, your stability. But in some situations, unfortunately, there isn't a way to fight. And it's important to know that as well, because otherwise you're spending all this money when, in the end, you might end up being deported and you're going to need that money in your home country. So I would say, absolutely now is the time to do it. Don't wait until, I know it's scary, but it's going to be much scarier once you're detained by ICE and you don't, that is the worst time to be making these important decisions about how to move forward with your case.
Thank you so much for that. Now we're moving on to our live Q&A session. So if you've got a question for Attorney Casas, now is your moment. Drop your questions in the chat or call us live at 516-703-3483. All right, our first question is, my husband is a US citizen, but he controls all the immigration paperwork and threatens to withdraw the petition and makes the whole process unbearable. If I leave him, can I still apply for legal status without his help?
So it's possible that in this type of situation, that VAWA might be an option. And again, without knowing all of the details of the person's case, we can't say for sure. But absolutely, if you are married to a citizen who is being controlling, abusive, using your status to make you feel like you have to go along with whatever they say because they're in control, that sounds like abuse to me. And I think it's definitely worth exploring the option of VAWA, which would allow you to do this on your own. And I will mention, completely confidential. He will never know. That's one of the biggest concerns from clients. Is this person going to be notified that I'm doing this? Is it going to make it worse? This is completely confidential. Immigration will never call that person. They cannot. I mean, there's times when the person is truly, their life is in danger. And if immigration were to contact this person, it's just going to make it worse. So it is absolutely confidential. It's a self-petition. So you are not relying on him. You are doing it completely on your own. And he will never find out unless you tell him this is how you got your green card. So I absolutely would encourage you to explore VAWA as an option.
All right, thank you. Next question is, if I file for a U visa, will my abusive partner be notified by immigration authorities? What does the whole process look like?
Yeah, absolutely not. The same thing for U visa. Absolutely not. They will never notify, the abuser. And that's also fully confidential. When you apply for the U visa, those records have extra protection because of the sensitive nature. And so with the U visa, again, the first thing is you need to get, for that one, you do need a certification from the police, which is different from VAWA. So for U visa, and the first step really, I would say, is a consultation to ensure that whatever crime you were a victim of qualifies, because again, not every crime will qualify for U visa. So that's usually the first step, is we'll determine that based on looking at the statute or the potential, what they could have charged the person with, or if they did charge them. And then we would need to obtain a certification from the police department, assuming that you filed a report, or it could also be obtained from a judge. There's a lot of cases where our client obtained an order for protection, protection against the abuser, and we've been able to go to the judge and get the judge to sign the certification. Sometimes it's the prosecutor. So it just depends. All these details will be determined during the consultation. But once we apply for the U visa does take 6, 7, 8 years. It takes a while to get a decision. But right now, it's still in place. The process where there's a potential bona fide determination, meaning that USCIS could review your case and issue you a work permit prior to the 7 or 8 years. Those cases are taking about, I would say, a year and a half, 2 years to get that work permit. It's not a guarantee. But basically, it's if USCIS reviews your case and it seems like you submitted a well-documented case, like it's likely they might approve it, then they'll issue you a work permit. So you would have that potentially within, I would say, a year to 2 years. But the U visa itself will take several years. But then after that, once the U visa gets approved, then you wait 3 years and you can apply for the green card. So it is a path to permanent residency.
Thank you. Next question is, I was abused by my ex-partner months ago, but I never reported it to the police because I feared deportation. I haven't gone through the divorce process yet. Can I still qualify for VAWA or the U visa?
Yeah, in that situation, I would say VAWA would make more sense to explore because I'm assuming the spouse has status, right? If the spouse is a U.S. citizen or a green card holder, and then VAWA will be a potential option. And again, even if you get divorced, you can still apply. You have 2 years after the divorce. Now you do have to apply within 2 years, right? You can't let more than 2 years expire. But what I love about it is it gives you the option to do what you need to do in your personal life. You don't need to stay with them, but if you choose to, that's your decision as well. Either way, VAWA becomes a separate thing. VAWA is based on the abuse that you have suffered. It's not based on whether you're still living with them or still married to them. It's based on the abuse that you have suffered at the hands of this person. So in that situation, absolutely, I think VAWA, assuming your spouse has status, then I think VAWA would be the first thing that I would evaluate for that person.
Definitely. Thank you. Next question is, as a man who has suffered domestic violence from my US citizen wife, do I still qualify for VAWA protection, or is this only available for women?
I love this question. And it's a great question because it is called the Violence Against Women Act, but it is not just for women. That is just the name that it has. Ignore the name. We have a lot of male clients. It's interesting because when I first started practicing and I was learning about VAWA, I learned about it from other attorneys, and a lot of attorneys would say, well, I think a male VAWA case is going to be harder. But things have changed, and it's we all understand that absolutely abuse is not just physical, because most of our male clients have been victims of emotional, psychological abuse. Some might be, physical as well. But we've had many male clients, and we have been able to file those cases, have gotten them approved because it's not dependent on your sex. It happens to both sexes, especially when we're talking about the imbalance of status, which is such a big thing, right? When that other spouse is a citizen, we see it happen often, unfortunately, where they use that control. Well, I'm the one who calls the shots. You have no say. You could be deported at any moment. And it happens to both men and women. And absolutely, as a male, you have the same right to apply as a woman does.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. How long does the U visa process take, and will I be able to work legally while waiting?
So the U visa process does take, I think right now we're at I think it's 8 years. It's a long time to get the final decision. But as I mentioned earlier, when you file for the U visa, not everyone will get this, but in our office, the majority of our clients have received the work permit within a year and a half to having filed the case, and it's under the bona fide determination process. BFD process is what they call it. And again, this is going to be for individuals that submit a well-prepared case. They include all the items that USCIS wants, and it's sort of like a superficial review that USCIS does, and they say, okay, we think there's a chance we'll approve, so we're going to give you this work permit. So yes, they will. As of today, that's the case. Obviously, with this administration, we don't know what's coming, but at this point, we still have that process in place, and we are still receiving the work permit for individuals who apply for U visa.
Definitely. And then, thank you. Our next question, which is also our last question from the audience, is, do I need a lawyer to apply for a U visa, or can I do it on my own?
With any process, you can do on your own. You're not required to have an attorney. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not. The U visa in particular, U visa and VAWA cases, are very tricky. You need to be able to prepare it, especially with, for example, even starting from getting the certification from the police department. As I mentioned, there's times when the police department will give us pushback. Sometimes they don't fully understand what the U visa is, and I've had to call chief of police and explain, this is you're not giving them the green card. All you're saying is you're certifying they were a victim and they cooperated. It's complex. There's going to be a lot of points along the way where you could absolutely benefit from legal advice, and not just any attorney, an attorney who has handled a lot of U visas, because that in itself is sort of a special area that not all attorneys handle. So can you do it? Absolutely. Just like you can represent yourself in criminal court by yourself, but is that recommended? I definitely would not recommend that. So I think it's worth spending the money to make sure that if you're going to do this, submit the strongest case possible.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Attorney Casas, for sharing these powerful insights. Your clarity and compassion is invaluable for survivors seeking both protection and stability. To our audience, thank you again for joining us. We hope this conversation has given you clarity on navigating VAWA protections and the U visa path for immigration survivors. Don't forget at immigrationquestion.com, you can ask your immigration questions for free and get in touch with a licensed immigration attorney who understands your case. You may also be eligible for a free confidential initial consultation. So head over to www.immigrationquestion.com and sign up today. And if you want to revisit this session or share it with a colleague, you can catch the replay on Spotify. Just search Borderless Talk by immigrationquestion.com. Before we wrap up, it's worth mentioning that attorney Naresh M. Gehi, the founder of immigrationquestion.com, was recently invited to speak at the Queens County Bar Association CLE session on seeking magnanimous relief on immigration matters. Being called to lead discussions like this is a reminder of the trust and recognition immigrationquestion.com has earned in the legal community. And that's the expertise and leaderships we bring, making sure that you are always have the right guidance, the right tools, and the right strategies to move forward with confidence. Join us again on Friday for another enlightening conversation. You won't want to miss it. Thank you so much again, Attorney Casas. We can't
Okay.
wait to have you back again. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.